Hello world, and we are back. My name's Kyle Fischl, and this is going to be episode 137 of my poker vlog. For this one, before I get into the hands, I wanted to share with you some of the tips that help me get through downswings or sessions that aren't quite going the way I'd like them to do. First tip. Some people say that dropping in stakes is a good strategy. I personally don't like that one. The difference between 2-5 and 1-3 or 1-2 is such a large chasm that I think it can actually cost you more money as you try to readjust to a lower stakes. 5-10 to 2-5 it's a little bit easier, but 2-5 to 1-3 is very different. So I actually prefer short buying a little bit. For example, if you always buy in for the max at a 2-5 game like 1K, try like a $600 or $700 buy-in. You still have plenty of value to play for without risking the full buy-in. Yes, you give up some value if you absolutely cooler your opponent, but you also save some money if you're the one on the other end of that. So try a little bit of short buying, lets you risk a little bit less. I like that strategy. Number two, when I'm going through a downswing, typically when I review my sessions, there's plenty of hands that I'm playing that I really just shouldn't. Maybe I'm so wide that I'm playing like 9-10 unsuited or like king 5 suited, some real hands that are never really going to flop nutted hands. And most of the times when you flop top pair, you're likely reverse dominated and your kicker's going to cost you more money than it's typically going to win. So tightening it up is definitely a good way to help get yourself out of a downswing, mitigate some losses here and there. It's terrible to sound like a nit, but if you're trying to break some bad habits, if the hand is very close, I would like to advocate towards folding when going through tougher times. Number three, definitely pay attention. When I'm going through a downswing, one thing that I notice is I'm on my phone a lot. I'm looking at videos, I'm texting people, I'm not paying attention to the game. There is a ton of information out there just waiting to be picked up. Your players' reactions after the hands, their bet sizing, how frequently they're playing. And if you're too busy looking at your phone, you're missing all this information, which could cost you hundreds of dollars later on when you're versing an opponent who may have played the exact same way, the exact same line many times that you didn't notice. So definitely pay attention if you are playing a poker game. For my final tip, it is the most important one. It will be at the end of the video, so right now we will roll the tape. Back at Sarasota, One-Eyed Jack's Poker Club, we bind in the game for $700, as my tip to getting out of a slight downswing is short buying a little bit. Don't have to risk too much with plenty of value on the table to play for. And we begin this section with winning two smaller, less notable hands before we arrive at a double board PLO bomb pot. I look down at ace, king, 5 deuce with spades. And when 8 players put $10 in the middle, the first flop is king, queen, jack, 2 clubs. Second board is king, king, 4, 2 diamonds. Having the only king left in the deck, I think this one is pretty good. Should have the bottom board all but locked up unless my opponent has pocket fours. But the small blind decides to pot it for $80. I see no reason to go anywhere, as I do have the nut draw on the top board with a 10 giving me the straight for a likely 3/4, as well as there's plenty of 2-pair runouts on that board where I will have top 2 pair with no better kings over possible. So when my opponent bets 80, I'm pretty happy to make the call here. The small blind calls as well. So we're going 3 ways to 2 turn cards, which is the 6 of clubs and the 7 of hearts. Clubs complete on top, so nowhere close to the nuts on that board, and pocket 7s are gonna beat my best trips on bottom. But still sitting with third nuts due to removal. My opponent doesn't really care at all. He continues and pots it a second time. The bet will be $320. I don't really see myself going anywhere. I should have the best hand on bottom pretty much all the time. And if the small blind continues for another bet, we should be able to chop at least one of these players' monies. But the small blind lets it go. So we are going heads up to 2 river cards, which is the deuce of diamonds and the 4 of clubs. Actually make kings over on bottom. My opponent goes all in for approximately $50 more. The 4 on bottom, little concerning as 7-4 somehow beats me now. But it does take away one of the combinations of pocket 4s that are possible. So we're going to be somewhat confident that we have the bottom board. When my opponent doesn't immediately show his cards, I actually think that there's somewhat possibility that I can actually scoop. I slowly turn over my cards saying I just have a king and he doesn't immediately show. So that's relatively good. But he eventually does have 10-9-9-3, no clubs and just the dummy end of the straight for the top board. Kind of shows how much money there is available in these double board PLO bomb pots. actually was somewhat live with a 10 to be able to scoop that board, even when clubs complete. Definitely an interesting one, I would say, but we are going to chop up a smaller to decent sized pot. Following that, it folds all the way to the button. He raises to $20. I look down at ace jack of diamonds. Definitely going to call this one. Honestly, should 3-bet. The button open has the widest range, but don't really want to play ace jack out of position in a bloated pot. So additionally, with my recent run bet, I think a little bit of pot control is warranted. If I was in position, definitely 3-bet this one, but it's just going to be a call here. When the flop is 10-6-4, rainbow, 1 diamond, actually it's better that I just called with this particular board. This smashes a caller more often than an opener, so I have all the pocket 4s, pocket 6s, 5-3, 5-7. He shouldn't have too many of those hands, but he disregards all of that as he bets $25. Not really going to fold here. I did not pot control to just let it go when I flop backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, and overs. So we're pretty happily going to be able to continue in this one. When the turn is the queen of diamonds, this is one of the best cards I could ever hope for. If my opponent had like 10-9, 10-jack, maybe ace-10 some of the time, he may bet a second time, just trying to put pressure on a small blind that would fold all the straight draws that I mentioned, but this one will absolutely be a check raise by me if my opponent bets. I could easily get a 10x to fold. I could easily have ace-queen, king-queen, and play the exact same way. But when I check it, my opponent checks it back, so no check raise possibility for me. Can I complete one of my draws one time? This is that time. I complete my pair draw when we river a pair of aces. Now thinking my opponent's best hand he could ever have here is a single middling pair. Unless he has exactly ace-10, I should have the best hand here all of the time. So I'm going to lead here. Don't want this to check through when I river what I believe is the best hand. I bet $35. My opponent folds pretty quickly, so he may have just had a weak button open, one c-bet, and not really connected at all and given up. But following that, I'm in the cutoff. I raise to $20 with ace-4 of clubs. The button and the big blind calls, so we go 3 ways to a flop of ace-10, deuce, 2 hearts. There are some times where I would check top pair, okay kicker, go for 1 street of pot control. This is not going to be one of those times, as I can get value from hearts, 10x. Maybe some of the time an ace-5 or ace-6, 7, 8 will fold to multiple barrels, so we're going to start with a $20 bet. The button is the only caller, so we're going heads up to a turn card, which is the 9 of spades. Brings backdoor spades, so we're definitely going to size up on this one. Put a lot of pressure on the weaker aces in my opponent's range. Can get value from some sticky 10s. And I definitely want to get value from the heart draws, queen, jack, king, queen, spades. So many things to get value from. So we're going to size up here $80. And my opponent eventually folds this one, so we take down a decent sized pot, show the ace. Not going to show my crap kicker, but happy to take one down. After that, I'm in early position with ace jack of diamonds. I raise to $20. The middle position, button, and the small blind calls. We're going 4 ways to a flop of 5, 6, 7 all diamonds. Now, this doesn't really connect to my opening range. I very rarely have exactly 8, 9. Sometimes have pocket 7s, pocket 6s, but mainly some ace X, suited connectors that are higher, and over pairs. So I think this is going to be a board where I'm going to check and evaluate turn. Massively multi-way, these opponents can have a lot of 2 pairs, some made straights, things such as that. When it checks to me, I check, middle position checks, and then the button throws out an $80 bet. When it folds to me, I think this is a great spot to check raise.
You're playing a dangerous game, Marianne.
My opponent can easily be throwing out a bet here just because it was checked to him, doesn't have to connect at all. If the sizing makes me believe it's very unlikely he flopped a straight. My opponent had the top of his range. I doubt he would go this big at it, full pot. So we're going to raise here. I think the best hand he could have is 7-8 for pair plus open-ended. And at that case, my pairs would be live as well. 2 overs, nut flush draw. We raise to $250. Additionally, my opponent is stacking his chips currently. Previous hand, he won a decent sized pot. A lot of the times people feel invincible when they've just won a big one, feel easy to throw money in the middle as a bluff, and I'm willing to get it all in with an opponent that has about a $400 or $500 stack with my exact hand. But it does not come to that. My opponent thinks for a little bit, finally finishes gathering his chips before eventually folding. Feels pretty good to win this one with ace high, not need to actually connect, like how I played it. Before we look down at pocket jacks, I'm in early position, I raise to $20. The button and the big blind calls, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of queen 6, 6, 2 spades. Not my favorite board. Queen is an over. A 6 beats me as well. There are spade draws to get value from, but this is going to be a board where I go for a street of pot control and check when checked to. The button bets $35. When the small blind folds, I did not check to simply check fold. This is going to be a pretty easy call. See what develops. When the turn is the 4 of clubs, I no longer have the betting lead. I have given it to the button. So we check it to him, see what he wants to do. He decides to check this one back. So probably just throwing a stab at there because it was checked to him. The river is the 3 of clubs. At this point, I really don't see myself getting value from worse. I think if my opponent had some sort of flush draw on the flop/turn, he might turn it into a bluff. But he would never call a bet if he had just a missed spade draw. Additionally, he would call with all queens, so I think the best play here is to check it to him and hope he throws out a bluff attempt that we can catch. But when I check, he checks it back. I show my hand, and jacks are good. Smaller size pot win there, feels pretty good, gains some momentum. Before we look down at jacks again, this time early position opens to $20. I'm definitely going to 3-bet this one. Jacks in position, so it's too strong to call. I raise to $65. Only the pre-flop aggressor calls, so we're going heads up to a flop, which is somewhat similar on Queen 5-3 2 hearts. Always an overcard out there. With jacks, it's a little more realistic and acceptable as there's much more overcards than, say, pocket kings have. But when he checks to me, I think I can just check this one back, go for a street of pot control, and bet turns if they are lower than jack if checked to. Otherwise, I can go into a check call mode with a hand with this much showdown value. When the turn is the king of hearts, brings 3 hearts, my opponent checks to me. This is not a particularly good card for my exact hand, but I think my whole range wants to bet here. If I had ace, king, king, queen, even pocket kings, I would check flop and probably want to bet this turn card. As well as if I had like ace, jack with just the ace of hearts. But in the moment, I thought that my showdown value was good enough where I can check this one back and hopefully see a safe river card. I did not check my hand in hand, as I did not want to do an obvious heart check. If I knew I had the jack of hearts, I'd probably throw out a bet here, go for some value against the naked ace of hearts, as well as possibly get some queen X to fold with a dicey turn card. But as played, I just checked this one back, and the river is the 9 of diamonds. When my opponent checks to me, I actually think my hand functions best as a bet, as a bluff. I double block the jack 10, I block the jack of hearts. But as played, I really don't see my opponent actually having that strong of a hand. So I actually think I have the best hand. I check it back. My opponent announces 8 high, and yeah, he was not going to pay off a bet anyway, and a bluff would have accomplished the same thing. Jacks are good. We are going to win this one, and couldn't have been against a nicer guy. Has a piece of the best merch in the game. If you want to get an awesome shirt like this, check out the link below for my merch shop. Cheers to that guy. At this point, it had been probably about an hour since I played a hand, and I hate knitting it up. I want to play hands. So when early position raises to 15 and there's one caller, jack 5 of spades, I guess is going to be a call because I did not come here to fold all day. The small blind and the big blind call, so we go 5 ways to a flop of queen 7-5 2 spades. Somehow we flop pretty much as good as we could ever hope for, playing a garbage hand. The pre-flop aggressor continues for $25. When the cutoff calls, I actually think this should be a raise a lot of the time. Pair plus flush draw is just too good to not put in more money. However, the particular opener in this hand is just super sticky, and I don't really expect him to fold a queen even to a raise. So we're going to just call this one, play in position, see what develops. Honestly, playing way too passive in this day, but this is how this day unfolded. When the turn is the ace of clubs, and the pre-flop aggressor checks to me, and then the cutoff checks as well, this is going to be the time where I do raise. I think I would peel with a lot of ace X's, especially ace X of spades. If I got my opponents to fold a queen, that would be an excellent result. Otherwise, we can bet now and pile river if a spade or a club comes, or a king. Plenty of cards we can bluff at if we don't connect. But we start out with a $90 wager. Pre-flop aggressor folds immediately. Cutoff takes his time, hoping for a fold as just a pair of 5s is probably not good enough. And he eventually does. And jack 5 of spades is going to be a winner on this one. Following that, it's been too long since we played pocket jacks, so why not do it again? I'm in middle position, I raise to $20. Only a later position player calls, and we go heads up to a jack 8-3 rainbow board.
Yes! Yes! Eat it!
as I've been playing very passive, I think this hand has to go in that range. I would check top set a lot of the time, so this is going to be one of them. Not even a flush draw to get paid off at, and it's pretty unlikely my opponent has a top pair, so we're going to check, hope he bets, or as I've been playing very passive, I think this hand has to go in that range. I would check top set a lot of the time, so this is going to be one of them. Not even a flush draw to get paid off at, and it's pretty unlikely my opponent has a top pair, so we're going to check, hope he bets, or catches up on the turn. He checks it back, and the turn is the 3 of diamonds. So we fill up immediately, nothing to be worried about. I can't really wait all day and hope my opponent can throw out a bet. Have to try to build this pot myself now, I think. So I go for a small wager of $25. My opponent calls very quickly, not really worried about any river card. 7 of hearts completes 9-10, which would be great if my opponent happened to have that hand. But either way, we have to bet here. We can't risk this checking through. I bet $75, somewhat small. Maybe an 8 will pay this off, maybe a 3. My opponent tanks for probably 20 seconds, hoping for a call. It'd be very helpful. He eventually does flick it in, and jacks will definitely be good on this one. The very next shuffle, I limp pocket 7s from under the gun, and it folds all the way to the button who checks his option. Flop is Jack 7-4 with 2 diamonds. It's good to flop sets. Middle sets are easier to get value from. My opponent could easily have a jack, have a diamond draw, can get value from all that. Want to start building the pot right now. I bet $15, but my opponent folds. Dang it. Not getting max value with sets feels kind of bad. But we'll move right along. Under the gun makes it $15. I look down at ace 7 of diamonds. Again, trying to play hands, not really getting dealt premiums, but this is going to be one we decide to continue with. I call the 15, middle position and big blind calls. So we go 4 ways to a flop of jack 8-3, 2 diamonds. On this flop, the pre-flop aggressor checks, and I really need to put in a bet here. This is a mistake I've been doing. I have to bet ace-high flush draws. The solver would disagree and say the ace-high flush draw is good enough to just check call, but when I'm playing an overly passive style and I doubt my opponents actually know what GTO would say to do in this spot, I think you have to switch it up here and just bet, hope to fold out any random middling pocket pairs that don't feel strong, maybe 8s, and just go with it, but as played, I check, and it checks through. Turn is the queen of clubs, so an over to the jack. Would definitely bet this one if checked to a second time. But the preflop aggressor pots it for 60. I think this is a really bad raise spot. If my opponent checked flop and bet turn, he could easily have a queen and just go for max protection against the 2 flush draws out there and straight draws and all the stuff out there. So I don't think a raise makes sense unless I somehow have queen jack or really just that. So call is going to be the play on this one and hope to connect with the river, which we do not. River is the queen of hearts. And now my opponent bets relatively small compared to the size of the pot, only $100. And my opponent's play pretty much lines up with ace, queen, king, queen. Just check flop as we missed and bet when we make top pair, bet smaller when we make trips. And I don't think he's going to fold to a raise on this particular run out. So I just put in the fold, played too passively, had plenty of opportunity to win this hand, but this one's going to be an L. Well, let's see if we can bump up the aggression as I raised to $20 from middle position with pocket kings. The small blind is the only caller, so we're heads up to a flop of ace 10-5 all spades. My opponent just leads out for $30, and having the nut blocker, having pocket kings, I like to play kings on ace high board like I'd play my entire range. If I 3-bet or bet with kings, I'd play it the same way I play aces, ace, king, kings, all the same. Ace high board's not going to scare me off. I'm going to raise this one. As well as the fact that if called, I have the nut flush draw to fall back on. So I raise to $100. And my opponent folds pretty quickly. I show because it's a friendly game, fun table. And after that, we chop a double board pillow bomb pot. So the stack is growing slightly into the game for $700. Right now, almost 1K in front of us. Feels decent. Before the next hand of note. I'm in middle position. I look down at 4-5 of hearts. I raise to $15. Player to my left calls and the small blind calls as well. So we're going 3 ways to king, queen, 9, 2 clubs. When small blind checks to me, I don't really expect him to fold a king or a queen right now. I have no real connection on this board, so I choose to check this one and see what the player behind would like to do. Player behind checks it back, and the turn is the 5 of clubs. So we turn a pair, not that we really think it's good. When small blind checks a second time, I think it's time to bluff. I don't think the player behind would check if he had a flush draw and it was checked to him. I think it's hard for either of my opponent to have a flush here, so I'm going to bet here, try to steal the pot. I bet $30. When the small blind is nearly caller, I think it's likely he has a king or queen X hand, maybe a backdoor club, but I think he's relegated to just a single pair. So hoping for a dangerous looking river card to be able to bluff at. This time the queen of diamonds definitely fits the bill. I think if my opponent had like king jack, king 10, this is kind of a horrible run out and kind of hard to hold on to. So thinking I'm going to turn my hand into a bluff, get most of his top pairs to fold. If he has a queen, he's just snap calling, but there's two of them out there. That's highly unlikely. So I bet $90 and my opponent snap calls.
Excuse me.
Well, he's going to win this one. That's kind of unfortunate to pick this spot to bluff. When my opponent flips his hand, I think it's just king X, and it's like that's the exact hand I'm trying to get to fold, and I get snapped with it. But he actually had king 7 of clubs, so turned the second nuts and decided to check it to me. I guess he just knew that this is the time I was going to blast off. Oh well, nice hand, sir. Following that, I button straddle, and with 4 limps, I look down at pocket queens. Not going to just limp this one. I have to size up. Definitely don't want this to go 4 ways. And if opponents are playing as wide as like king 7, we're pretty happy to pile as much money in pre as we possibly can. I make it 80. First 2 players fold. Third limper decides to call. Fourth limper folds. So we're heads up to 5-4-4-2 clubs. Well, if my opponent had any pocket pair, 6s plus, he'll probably call a bet of any size. If he has a club draw, he'll probably call any size. And if we got like ace X or king X to fold, it wouldn't be the worst result in the world. So I'm going to size up here. I bet $135. My opponent folds, says he missed, and we take down a okay size pot before a final hand of note. I have ace 8 offsuit, really somewhat card dead. Yes, I've had jacks many times, but besides that, the only playable hands are the ones shown. With 1 limp, I raise to $20. The small blind, button, and limper decide to call, so we're going 4 ways to a flop of 9-8-6 with 2 spades. I do have the ace of spades. That's relatively significant in this hand. Get a backdoor spade draw as well as middle pair. When all my opponents check to me, I just think that this is going to be a spot where I c-bet, have a pair, have an overcard, backdoor flush draw. Highly likely that all these opponents missed, so I bet $45. And one by one, they slowly fold. I guess my tight image was getting me paid off in this spot. But we were into the game for $700, out of the game for $853, which is a profit of $153. We're there for 6 hours, which equates to $25 an hour or 5 big blinds an hour. Yep, happy to book a small win after some run bad previously. It's good to break a losing cycle, and that leads me to my final tip on how to break a downswing. And this is the most important one. It is take the small wins. If you're on a 5 or 6 buy-in downswing, the best thing you can do is just come to the realization that you're not going to make it all back in one session. It's unfortunate, but you're not going to have an amazing 4 or 5 buy-in just day and get it all back and then some. So take the small win, enjoy it. You're now on a winning streak. Come back another day. And that's what I did. $150. I mean, that's a good steak dinner. We'll take it. If you watched all the way to this point, thank you. I appreciate it. Let me know what your tips are in breaking downswings, and I will see you all on the next one.